Well, my mic stand quite literally fell apart the other day. Like it's cheap from Amazon, so it fell apart. So now I have the handheld get quality audio. Today we're going to talk about the Alco PAs. You're going to see a review of these coming up in a future edition of Model Railroad News. Walthers created a re-release of their old proto tooling of the Alco PA-1, I believe. And we're going to take a look at the Delaware and Hudson version and the Lackawanna version.
Yeah. And you're
Cool.
doing we've split these up. As you say, this is a Walthers Mainline release.
Mm-hmm.
It started life in the 1990s as a lifelike Proto 2000, and then it stayed that way into about the mid 2000s when Walthers bought Lifelike's model train line. And it's come back at least one other time, because when I sent you, you're doing the Delaware and Hudson with DCC and sound, and I have an Erie Lackawanna in the standard DC to put a 21 pin decoder into it. And that's going to be the review that we're doing in print for Model Railroad News. We're looking at that's going to be our May edition, which is all Amtrak. But I thought it would be neat because, as you know, the D&H stuff ran from the late 60s into the early Amtrak years.
Mm-hmm.
So it'll be kind of a little something different from that. So we can take a look at the layout that you and I are working on for this, that we're working on the print part of this right now. And we've got the pictures and everything in place. And you mentioned it's a PA1. And, you know, I should have had pictures together for that, but there's PA1, 2, and 3 were the ones that Alco did. And they're mostly the same, but there are some little differences. But yeah, this tooling is basically a PA1. And I remember that of the first runs in the 90s, that this thing literally could pull, you know, anything and everything. And that it's amazing the amount of weight in it. It, of course, is a first generation, diesel locomotive. This was Alco's big contender to EMDs like E7, E8s, and E9s. And we talk about that a little bit here in the prototype profile. What you're looking at is Drew and I's layout as it is now. So this review is not finished, but this kind of gives you a little behind the scenes when I'm working with the reviewer in another location, because I'm in Missouri and Drew's off in Delaware, that I send the stuff I put together as a PDF file so he can see the pages and kind of see the space that's available and what we're going to cover. So like this is the opening page of the review that shows them both. I really like both the schemes. What's your thoughts on the color schemes of both of the roads?
I think it's pretty vibrant. I have some older Delaware and Hudson stuff, but nothing that's really tailored to the prototype, like Walthers has made theirs match the paint, put a little bit more effort into it than they did in the 90s. Um, so I really like the blue and the yellow and the stainless steel panels that were kept from the Santa Fe. They really stick out. They did that really nice.
I agree. I said, when I first got that, when shooting pictures, I said that, man, when you get this, take a look at it. Because
Hmm.
again, I think if it's too shiny or done too mirror like, it can get a toyish look. But this had just that right amount that even though it's plastic, it looks like metal and had a really good look to it. This shot, as we're looking at a couple of things to pick out here that you can see in the differences, even though this is a mainline release, so it's budget priced, there are some like road specific details. And looking at, we'll start right up front at the nose. You see the D&H has two headlights because that's what the Santa Fe had, and they retained it. And the Erie Lackawanna has a single headlight. And then going up above the cab windows, that number board uh, that's mounted over the cab there in front of the air horns was a Santa Fe feature that the D&H kept. And Walthers has that detail on this model where you see Erie. These were originally Lackawanna PAs, and they became Erie Lackawanna with the merger in the early 60s, but they didn't have that number board over the cab. And then behind the air horns, I think you can pretty much make it out. The dynamic brakes on an Alco like this is that like vertical or horizontal section that's kind of raised right where the blue path kind of comes to a straight line over the cab roof. Right behind it, you see like there's two like vents or grills and then a slightly raised portion. That's dynamic brakes, whereas the Erie Lackawanna doesn't have that. And then notice too the exhaust stack that on the Erie it's positioned oriented in this one direction, but then look at it on the D&H that it's sideways. And that I think is water cooled or air cooled turbocharger makes the difference. Like depending on what sets in there, that exhaust can be two different ways. So that's a
Mhm.
separate piece. I like the fans on top too. Did you notice the blades and the screen area and that round radiator fan in the back?
Yeah, I did. And one other detail that you missed, and I want to point out, is the number boards things on the Delaware and Hudson. There's the single one over the cab, and that's the only one it had. So there's the right and left side. It has the wings, where on the Erie Lackawanna, those have number boards on them. And I
Yeah.
assumed because it was a mainline model when I got mine that maybe it was just up to you to decal it. But when I looked at some footage and some photos, they're actually left blank. So they were just kind of little wings there.
Yeah, kind of painted over them. And
Mhm.
some of the other road names, and I think when we get later in some of the other pages, we'll see these little thin number boards, I think are the originals. And then those larger kind of angled number boards that are more like F units on EMD power. Walthers has that too. I think the Southern Pacific and the Pennsylvania units have got that feature. And then the last thing on the back, they both, of course, have steam generators, are those two
Mhm.
squarish parts in the back. So again, for a budget model, it does have, there are some road specific details that maybe you wouldn't expect.
And
And
one last thing I did notice, I don't know if it's on the Erie Lackawanna version, but looking at this photo, I don't see it. Is in the front corner, it doesn't show well in this photo. There's a marker light that painted over marker light. So
hmm,
I don't know if that's a prototype specific thing or if it was on the Erie Lackawanna too.
well, we'll have to look. Yeah, let's go ahead to the next page and see
Cool.
what we've got. I really, as I say, our May issue is going to be Amtrak themed, so I wanted to show this one picture is August 1974, and that's early Amtrak is the red-nosed E unit there, and that's in Albany, New York. But D&H, and we talk about this in the profile and the history on them. It's really cool that the railroad basically was running their passenger trains with little Alco switcher or road switcher
Hmm.
units, and they get a new president in the late 60s that saw Santa Fe discarding the PAs. And so he salvages them basically, and they get to run on the D&H. And I think you see in that history, and we cover all that, they run for a while and they get set aside, then they come back. But it's a really neat story to think that here, because by August 74, Amtrak's going on 3-4 years old, and here is the Adirondack train with D&H PAs that we still had kind of, even though it was an Amtrak related service that
And they were only 4 units on the Delaware and Hudson, so it's amazing that they got this much attention.
exactly the one shot. I love the picture here at the bottom right with the, and boy, that's, as a kid I can remember when they'd get an Alco going, sometimes it was absolutely black smoke because I never saw
Uh,
steam locomotives, but Alcos have always been considered honorary steam locomotives because of that. But yeah, there's three of the four ex Santa Fe PAs on that train, and then we've got the one picture there at the side shows that where they came from. And yeah, I guess Santa Fe painted over the number boards too on the side, which I didn't realize, but at least at that
uh,
point that one's got red too. Yeah. And then I like that top right picture that I got that shows, now those are the multi-unit receptacles so you can hook up and run the cables between the units for control, and you can see the red and even a little yellow through the two ports there on the right side of the headlights, that they painted everything but didn't quite get into that area. And now this, I think these are all supposed to be PA1s, but these did get rebuilt. And if you look, and again, the main line's not a road specific detail wise, but some of the things you can do, and we do, I go through this both on the Erie Lackawanna, and I think I mentioned some of these for you to talk about on the D&H, but you can see the grab irons put on the side of the nose, which
mhm.
became a railroad rule in the late 50s. So you could access and fix like windshield wipers, or get junk out of an air horn if you caught a bird or limb or something in the air horn and had a problem. You could easily get up there with that extra stirrup step over the truck, and then the grab irons up on top of the noses in addition. And then actually the MU receptacles in the nose would be a bit of a thing to do. But you'll
Hmm.
also notice see the grill work down the side. The model has the more as delivered, where you kind of have that brow that comes over the cab window door and then arcs back right next to like the war bonnet yellow stripe. And if you notice that one top right shot of 17 shows it with rebuilt side grills. And I think that's also like that's how the PA2s or 3s looked. They didn't have that like chrome plated bar that comes from the corner of the windshield down over the side. They had that more just straight line of grills. But then if you do look down, our picture of 19 you can see has that feature. So again, these were older and they did go through a lot of changes. Also, this one top picture with the Amtrak, you'll notice they changed out the lower headlight to a pair of dual seal beams, and that's why
Hmm.
it's a blue background with the two ports. So, again, as these things get older, there's so many little changes that get done that even with just four locomotives, looking at these three pictures of, well, two of them are of 17 and then the one of 19, there's so many variations in these, again, because being secondhand.
Hmm.
What do you think of the sound? Have you got to run this D&H very much yet?
Soundtracks and ESU, not necessarily that one's better than the other, but even just that difference when Walthers has been using soundtracks for a while and they switch over to ESU, it sounds really good. And I love Drivehold. It's got to be one of my favorite things that somebody's put in a locomotive.
And now, what does it do? Explain that to me. What does Drivehold do?
So Drivehold, you can either be at 0 or you can be at speed step 14. And you've hit function 9, Drivehold, and then you can turn it up or down to whatever kind of speed step, and it'll rev the motor up, but it won't do anything to the speed. It'll just keep that speed until you turn
Ah,
function 9 back off, and then it'll either speed down or accelerate or stay about the same to where the throttle is at when you turn off function 9.
that's cool. Wow.
Mhm.
And then of course the light package too. I told you about that, and I remember that was seemed really cutting edge back in the
Mhm.
90s to have that gyrating light feature that was in the old original DC wiring too. And I see that that's
Uh,
been retained, and I think it's a really nice feature, the sweeping light for the upper headlight.
and another thing about ESU, the decoder, I think there's 4 extra lighting outputs on the board for anybody who wants to add like a cab light or light for the back of the unit.
And they're really easy to, in fact, the whole shell removal, yeah, stay there for a second. Actually,
Yeah.
let's go back and look at that. um you get I really like that cover, and I remember after I
Hmm.
did the photography I left that on there to send it to you. So all you do is, the Phillips screwdriver and take the coupler pocket and the coupler out. And then that other one, that's not a great picture, you can see it, but it's more rounded so it would stick out, and I think it's set up to cover the coupler in place, so if you're careful you
Mm.
can snap it on. But I really like that look. That seems to be like the classy and, official way to run a passenger locomotive like this, I think, is to have that cover in front so it has a sleek look. But
Yeah.
it's very neat looking. The other thing I noticed is, and you can see it really well in that D&H shell picture, the early versions from Lifelike from the mid 90s, all those vertical handrails were made out of plastic and they were really
Mhm.
fairly thick. So it was obvious they weren't, this has a much thinner prototype look. Those original ones were thick and they tended to get a little bit like bowed in or to the side, like running down the side of the unit. It was hard for them all to be that perfectly straight like they should look, that, they would tend to get a little warped. Whereas these are wire, and not only are they thinner, but I thought in general they had, again, a more, they were all straight. There was no bending to them, that it really had a good look to it. And here's the back. Yeah, that Erie Lackawanna down here shows the back. Now, of course,
Mhm.
finding pictures would be tough, but as you say, you think there's an output on that ESU to, you could actually drill a hole and wire up a reverse light, maybe.
Yeah, get a casting and you could just stick it on there.
Hmm.
And make sure it's on the right side as we discovered in the E8 episode.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a detail kit. It sells for $10, and it's set up to put lift rings across the top. You can see on that back shot of the Erie Lackawanna, the holes at the bottom are pre-drilled there. There'd be a couple grab irons, and then you drill holes in the front to add a couple more. As you can see in our prototype pictures across the page there, above the front pilot that they get some. Boy, those Eries, look at all the stuff.
Hmm.
The smaller picture in the center is that's the second paint scheme. That's a two-tone green. They came in black and yellow. And then the top is how they looked in the 60s for Erie Lackawanna. But man, that shot, look at all they put that funny MU receptacle that looks like the headlight or the number board piece on the D&H. They've got that over the headlight. There's a firecracker antenna up there by the air horns. They put vents in the side below the number boards. They've got that extra vertical grab iron there by the number board. Grabs going up the nose. I mean, that is covered with. I mean, when you think of how beautiful, like the D&H with the coupler covered, how sleek it looks, and then this Erie is just like, wow, there's stuff
Yeah, a
all
whole
over.
lot going on.
Yeah, but that, again, as they got older, in fact, as they rebuilt these, they took steam generators out of most of them as passenger business went down, and these
Mm,
ended up doing freight work for their last years. I think
cool.
we have, let's go, yeah, down to this page. Um, these, oh, I hope that's I have to look at that, but I think that's right. Diesel Era has got, that's a place to go. And it's dieselera.com. Paul Withers is the guy that started that magazine. And boy, when you're looking for facts, figures, and information and pictures on locomotives, when he covers stuff, that's great. I got you a copy of the one with the D&H stuff in it, and
Hmm.
it basically lays all the information out for you. Oh, here's one of the
Absolutely.
others that nickel plate has the big angled number boards on the
Yeah,
side.
I love the look of nickel plate stuff. It always the paint scheme. There no two different locomotives have the same paint scheme with them.
It's a good look. It's amazing that, I mean, the PA is not as sleek maybe as the EMDs with the rounded nose, and they're very
Hmm.
streamlined. When you think about it, a PA is really very square and chunky. But again, all three of these schemes we're looking at, somehow they all get a really neat look. That nickel plate
Hmm.
with the white streak coming back, and of course the war bonnet is classic. Even in blue, I think it's just as neat looking. But it's amazing how sleek that PA ends up looking when you think, well, compared to an E unit, this is really square and blocky. Yet it looks pretty good. Let's step back before we wrap up on this and look at the drives on the one page so
Oh,
we can talk about that.
well, one thing I want to say,
Oh yeah, no,
uh,
go.
I was looking at the detail pack and I was really thinking like this could pass as a Proto 2000 model as the early version of at least the Delaware and Hudson version because the Erie version seems a little bit more chunky as far as detail parts go. But really for the Alco PA, if you bought the $10 detail pack and then you got some coupler cut levers and made that a little effort to add the MU receptacle on the front, you'd really have yourself a proto model for a fraction of what a proto model would sell for. Like it really is for the
Oh
Delaware and
yeah.
Hudson version pretty accurate as is.
Yeah, it really works well for that. And when we look at the drives, that's the other nice thing is that Walthers, the drive you get in these, although it's a mainline model, it's a proto series drive. And you can see
Hmm.
that all the die cast metal is what makes that so heavy. I've now got numbers on the Erie Lackawanna. I did numbers on your D&H and look at that thing, 24.7 ounces, and it pulled
Hmm.
almost 6 ounces. I mean, that's amazing. And then,
Comparatively, the Broadway Limited Challenger was between 9 and 12 ounces, and
wow.
the Scale Trains turbine with both units was 8.5 ounces. So
Yeah,
when you think about it, two of these things would pull more than the
yeah,
turbine.
it's crazy. I mean, they really are amazing pullers. And then looking at the two, of course, the silver base one is your D&H with sound, and you can see the on top of the green board that its blue board is obviously the sound decoder, and then the all black chassis shows the Erie Lackawanna, and it's got the 21 pin plug poked into it. And I've got a Digitrax decoder that I'll put into it for the review, and when I give the by the numbers, I'll give that information for it. So I'm going to drop that in. And the shell removal, as you've seen, if you just pull on the skirts on the side of the fuel tank, and then just you can lift it right off from the back, and you can
Yeah, two
angle
tabs
it.
under the fuel tank, and
Yeah.
there's two more on the rear.
So it's a easy model to work
Hmm.
with. The sound, of course, is in the back, the round over that back
A
truck.
big speaker. It's really loud.
It is. Oh,
Yeah.
and that's the other thing. I shot this picture of the bottom because you're thinking, well, is there, speaker grill on the fuel tank? And no, it'd be back behind that rear truck, but that's open. So yeah, I thought the sound output was good.
Cloud.
Yeah, very good. But it's
Cool.
really it's an awesome model. And as you say, I think one of the cool things about it is here you can get DCC with ESU sound, a great running model. It's got the light package with the gyro light in front. And as you say, $10 and add the detail kit to it. And for something like the D&H, it's, pretty much right on
Hmm.
for how some of them looked that, you're in business for, about what? Well,
Less than $175, pretty
yeah,
much.
yeah, they're a nice deal. And boy, it's a great looking locomotive. I mean, it for, passenger trains is such a classic. The Alco is. Yeah.
Well, I got my unit. I pulled it outside, and where I was when it was delivered, it's 20 degrees outside. So I brought it in, and just the touch of it, it was cold to the touch. So I thought that I was fooled that the shell was die cast because I didn't really think it through. And I was looking through the Facebook messages we were talking about it, and I'm like, I look so stupid, don't I? But I really touched it, and it was cold to the touch. So I thought it was die cast because it just looked spot on.
It does, yeah, and the finish will trick you. They did such a nice job on the stainless steel panels that, yeah, for a second you look at that trying to decide. But no,
Hmm.
it's awesome looking. We looked at the Erie pictures, the Erie Lackawanna prototype shots, the D&H. I think, yeah, we kind of hit. And these are out. There's several road names. There's also A B sets. So if there were like neither of these roads had B units, but like for the Rio Grande and the Southern Pacific in daylight paint, you can buy both single A units and you can buy an AB pair that are both powered and with sound or without, and with DCC or without. So you can really get a nice set of equipment there. Check with your dealer. Look at walthers.com and
Trainworld.com.
trainworld.com and look for availability on these. These came out in the last month or so, because I think I sent that one to you a week or two back and we laid this out. So they're still around and they are nice pieces if you're looking for good passenger power at a good price. That I thought was pretty cool. Did you have any other thoughts on this release?
I think we covered it all, but I didn't know what to expect because my last Walthers Mainline locomotive was the SW1, which it kind of reminded me of some of the stuff that came out in the 90s as far as like plastic handrails and really kind of just the shell with some handrails on it. This is great. I mean, this is really impressive. And what really took me, like, I didn't expect they'd do it, was the skirting under the fuel tank. You can see the either the water or the air. I'm not sure with this with the all the plumbing that goes on with the
Mhm.
water steam generator, but you could see it through the hole in the steps here, the fuel tank and whatever other piece of cylinder in there.
It's a nicely done model, and believe it or not, for as popular as these were, the PA's first generation diesel, so it would have been out after like World War II ish, is it's when it was new. But for like HO models, we didn't have plastic Alco PAs until about 1970, and the Athearn Blue Box came out, and Concor imported an A and a B from, I think it was Lilliput in Europe, built it for them, and it's a fairly uncommon model to find today. But yeah, for as classic as this is, the hobby went without it until 1970, and then a higher end version with a lot of separate details we didn't have till the mid 90s. So it's amazing sometimes some of these really classic diesels that you think, oh, there must have been bunches of those. It's like, no, that one, it took forever to really get to an awesome model.
Hmm.
Well, very cool. Very cool.
Cool.
That's walthers.com or trainworld.com to look for those. And Drew and I will have our review. It's planned for the May 2021 Model Railroad News.
There we go.
There we go.
Cool.